Tansei, welcome to Soul Medicine, Ancient Psychologies for Wellness. I am your host, Dr. Karlee Fellner, psychologist and member of the Métis Nation of Alberta. As always, feel free to pick up what fits for you and to leave what doesn't. I'm just here to present a different way of understanding mental health and wellness. This podcast is not intended to provide or take the place of professional advice. If you or someone you know is in need of mental health supports, please reach out to one of the many resources available in your area or to a trusted professional. All details and potentially identifying information about iyiniwak, people who I've worked with, have been changed to maintain their anonymity and privacy. Spiritual boot camp. I've been talking about it a lot lately to a lot of people, so I figured I should probably make an episode about it. I first started using that term about 10 years ago when I had made a commitment that required me to level up. And I remember at the time, basically all hit the fan in my life. Things were falling apart left and right. And I was like, what the is going on? Coming from my way of understanding life up until that point, I was thinking I was making a lot of positive changes in my life. So why the hell was everything falling apart? And at some point, I had this realization like, yeah, okay, this is spiritual boot camp. What I realized was I was being tested, I was being pushed, pulled. Things fell apart to the point where I completely fell apart. Some of the worst fears that I had held for years actually came to be. And in that conventional sort of colonized thinking space, I was like, this makes no sense. I'm making all these positive changes. I made this commitment. That's such a positive thing. Like, why is this happening? And then I realized because it's spiritual boot camp. I was being forced to face some of my worst fears and do what often gets referred to as shadow work so that I could really deepen my relationship with spirit, with the source of life, with the universe, all of creation. And so I could work through and release these fears that I'd held on to for so long. I remember at that time, I was listening to a lot of different podcasts with different spiritual leaders and teachers. And one of the ones I listened to over and over, which I highly recommend, was an episode where Gary Zukav was speaking with Oprah on her Super Soul podcast. And I must have listened to that episode hundreds of times during that period of my life. He was talking about how when we make decisions and take action out of fear, it creates destructive consequences. And when we make decisions and take action out of love, these are my words, not Gary's, but a lot of good medicine comes out of that in good ways. And so what spiritual boot camp was forcing me to do was actually release a lot of really deeply seated fears, some of which I didn't even realize I had, and other ones I knew I had, but didn't really realize the power that they had over me. And as I've continued in this journey of continuous growth and learning and spiritual boot camp, I've really come to appreciate the value of those experiences and the things I've been through in shedding a lot of those fears, even when consciously I didn't realize it. Because making choices based on fear happens in really subtle ways. Things, for example, like taking a job that has really good salary, really good benefits, all of those things, when maybe we're being called to a different space that might look a bit more unconventional. And that's something that can be really subtle. For one, for motives like that can come out of a place of love. And there's this fine line because maybe we're doing that out of love for our family and wanting to care for them. But again, if we're being called into a different space that maybe looks a bit more conventional, it can be that fear that drives us into that more conventional space. And that could be something that then ends up having a number of destructive consequences, maybe for our health, our families, whatever it may be. And so as I was moving through this process of spiritual boot camp, I was realizing it was really strengthening me. I always think about how healing is a spiral. It's not linear. Let's say we have a fear of being alone. And we can kind of trace where that goes back to in our childhood. It's also connected in with the generations, the collective. And so we'll do some work on that fear of being alone and get into a different relationship with it where it's not affecting us as much. Then as we continue through life and through that spiral, we'll come back to it. We'll come back to it in deeper ways, and something will challenge us on an even deeper level of that fear of being alone that we didn't realize that we had. And that's a process we go through our whole life. I mentioned Gary Zukav. He talks about it as the earth school. Our spirit incarnates, and we're basically in this place to develop our spirit and to grow and learn and heal. Spirit exists in the spirit world before we incarnate and come into this life. And the way that I've been taught is we choose our parents, we choose a lot of our experiences in life, and we also come into this life with a number of inherent gifts and strengths and abilities, no matter who we are and how we show up in the world. We have gifts and abilities that we are meant to bring to the collective, to our communities, to humanity, to this planet. And you hear those teachings in other ancient psychologies. A really good book on this that I highly recommend is Sacred Contracts by Carolyn. Myss. She's a medical intuitive and has all this incredible wisdom and knowledge through her gifts to receive messages through spirit. And that book, Sacred Contracts, is so aligned with the way that our iyiniwak indigenous teachings talk about the agreements that we make before we come into this life. And so you'll hear and find these teachings across many cultures globally, those ancient psychologies that come through land, come through spirit, through the source of life and the universe. And so we come in with these inherent gifts, inherent abilities, inherent strengths. And sometimes in the process of developing those gifts, we'll go through spiritual boot camp, especially in the world we live in today, when we're really authentically and genuinely working to live a better life. There's going to be so many things that come that try to distract us, that try to buck us off the path and reroute us and take us away from living, manifesting, and sharing our gifts with the world. And part of that is just a law of nature. When you look at the creation of the cosmos, you see the interactions of these forces that are ancient, these ancient dynamics between the day and the night, creation and destruction, calm and chaos. And these are dynamics that are as old as time. And when we're coming from iyiniwak indigenous understandings, we know that there's a relationship there, that it's not about either or, but again, we're leaning into the and the relationship between creation and destruction, between the calm and chaos. And spiritual boot camp is that. We may be making a conscious effort to live a better life, or maybe the universe has just decided it's time for us to level up, because we're not always making that conscious decision or choice to level up either. Sometimes we're just pushed into it by other factors. And that's where spiritual boot camp takes place, where we begin to notice all of these challenges that are coming, where we have the opportunity to decide, which path am I going to take? Am I going to walk this path as much as possible, because nobody's perfect, of my highest good, of my gifts that are going to support the whole? Or am I going to succumb to temptation, to tests, to those energies that are more destructive, harmful, life-taking energies? And those dynamics exist in many little moments all over the place. It's not just you choose to walk this particular path and that's it. Because those tests, those temptations, those energies that are trying to distract you, buck you off, push you to grow, to do your shadow work, those are going to come all along the way in many moments. And so that choice of which path we choose happens in these micro moments. That's part of what Gary Zukav was talking about in those moments of making decisions based on fear or based on love. And we're only human, so we're all going to experience those moments where the chaos gets the best of us, where a destructive thought pattern that maybe we're used to gets the best of us. The beautiful thing is when we're coming at it from this greater perspective of iyiniwak psychologies, we can zoom out and kind of see, oh, okay, this is what's going on here. And especially when we're really starting to make big changes in our lives, it can be so easy to default into old patterns that can hold us back. I always use the metaphor of the ruts because it's such a simple one, such a powerful one. When we're used to a particular way of thinking or being in the world, it's like you're driving off in the bush on those 4x4 roads in those big, muddy, deep ruts where it's very hard to get out of. It's like you're on this track. And when you're first starting to make those changes, coming out of that can be really hard because that's how our brain works too. When our brain is used to firing in particular patterns, those neural connections are really strong. And so when we're starting to make those changes, coming out of that is like getting out of those deep ruts. You're making new neural connections while the ones that have been there for a long time are like trying to pull you back. So there's this kind of push-pull dynamic where and it's really challenging you to fundamentally shift something in your life, whether it's related to thought patterns, to actions, to how you're making decisions. There's countless things. It's just that challenge to us to actually step towards those things we fear and be prepared to be tested and face those in a way that you're staying true to that path of life-giving, life-promoting, creative, productive, constructive energy that's going to bring ripples of wellness, of healing, medicine to the world. Now, there's such a diversity of billions of people's experiences on this planet. Obviously, I cannot speak for all humans. Within the circle of people I'm connected with, as well as a lot of the people that I work with, our experiences in spiritual boot camp are really pushing us to deepen that connection and relationship with the source of life, the universe, that energy that gives each and every one of us life, that animates us and animates this world. And that process of spiritual boot camp is just pushing us into tapping into that life force, that source of life in deeper and deeper ways, really leaning into faith. And in leaning into faith, leaning into surrender. And what I really appreciate is that I hear spiritual teachers of all kinds of traditions talking about this in different ways. Carolyn, Myss, who I mentioned, she talks about the dark night of the soul and the roots of that concept in Euro-Western traditions. You see these themes throughout history and in these stories and in our experiences about these tests, whether chosen or not, and how they encourage us to really deepen our medicine and our gifts. I've also experienced and witnessed that there's often this point of no return, where once you've committed to a particular path, there's no turning back. And the universe is going to challenge you from that point forward. And again, we don't always choose this. Sometimes it chooses us. Absolutely life-altering experiences that fundamentally challenge who we thought we were, how we used to think, and a lot of the ideas, the resentments, the notions that we once held on to where moving through those experiences in a particular way and choosing that path of faith, of surrender, of wellness, of healing, of leaning into all the medicines that are there and available to us really transforms us. I remember dreams that showed me the transformations that were happening. What's the phoenix rising from the ashes? It's all of these metaphors and these ancient stories that many of us are actually living every single day, whether we do or don't realize that. It's all our perspective of what it is that we're going through. And so what are the things that help us on that path as we're going through spiritual boot camp? How do we pass those tests? Having a conscious awareness is always a critical piece of this because we do really need to get clear about the choices that we're making and whether they're coming from a place of fear or coming from a place of love and faith and trust and surrender to the process and to the flow, that we're being pulled into. So much of spiritual boot camp is about giving up the illusion of control, because in the big picture of life, control is an illusion. Ultimately, we have very little control, and that alone is a challenge that so many people are faced with, to release this idea of control and attempts to control. And some people are almost forced into that place of surrender. Part of the awareness that gets us through spiritual boot camp is being really honest with ourselves about the world we live in today, about the number of distractions, the pervasive energies of destruction and chaos and violence that surround us. There's a lot of that energy that's coming and trying to knock people off of a good path, or distract them or scare them from pursuing their highest good, pursuing their gifts. And yet those distractions, that chaos, that destruction is the very thing that helps us strengthen those gifts when we choose to stand strong in the face of those challenges that are coming, and to keep moving forward in the face of those challenges that are coming. I personally come from a prairie or a plains context, so the bison herds will face the storm. They walk into the storm. They don't turn away in fear. And so for me, I actually use the bison to help me in my process of spiritual boot camp, that when these challenges are coming at me, it's embodying that energy of the bison that helps me to continue moving forward despite whatever it is that's trying to knock me off. It's like this teaching that I've received of, when we're on a way to a ceremony that's really going to help us, there's often going to be things that come up that try to stop us from getting there. A flat tire, some kind of delay on the road. Somebody's telling us 100 reasons why we shouldn't be going. And our task is to move through those challenges that are trying to distract us and buck us off of that path. Now, that's different than situations sometimes where something might come up to pull us away from a path that we're on, or wherever we think we're going, because it's actually pulling us onto the path that's for our greater good. And so a lot of people will ask, well, how do I know? And so for me, it's always asking into the body, asking into our spirit, asking into our gut, asking into our intuition, what feels right in a good way, because it can be really easy to act or make decisions off of fear, off of old trauma responses. And so really taking a moment to take that step back, tap in to the bodily wisdom, because your body will speak to you, and you can practice listening to what your body's trying to say to you. Is this a place I want to go? Does this feel right? And then listening when you get the answer, because also a big part of what happens is we start to question ourselves. And again, all of that questioning is just tied in to those energies that are testing us. Well, I just feel like I want to go because of this. Well, that's just happening because of this. We find different ways to self-sabotage or to invalidate what our gut, our intuition, our spirit, our body is telling us to do. And that's one of the things that can actually keep us stuck in a particular place for a long time. And we might not be happy there. There is this sense that it's easier. I always say there's 1,000,001 reasons not to do something that's actually going to be good for you and that's going to help you, especially when it's different from your routine. But that doesn't mean we don't do it. It just means it's easy to find those reasons not to. It's easy to get distracted. It's easy to get bucked off. And so I always encourage folks to remember that's just those energies that are coming to distract and buck you off. And of course, we are human beings. We're all going to get bucked off sometimes. We're all going to stay in those deep, muddy ruts for a while, doing the same thing that we've been doing. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We will continue to be tested and pushed. The universe is compassionate. The universe is loving. There's more than one opportunity, typically. And like I say, it happens in all these little moments where we have a chance to get it right over and over and over again. And it's really making that conscious effort to choose that path. And yes, of course, it's easier to keep living in a way that we're used to living. It's really hard to make this kind of change. It's really hard to face spiritual boot camp head on like the bison. And it's so worth it. And that comes back to that phrase, choose your hard, because it's really easy to say that this is easier. What I'm used to is easier. That's hard. And yeah, it is. I'm not downplaying that in any way. And it's also hard to continue to live in ways that aren't supporting your mental, emotional, spiritual growth and development. So, as hard as it is to say, all right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to commit to whatever it is for your context, it's just as hard in a different way not to. And sometimes that might be because we're not living in full integrity. I remember in the third episode just bringing up an example of somebody who continued working in an environment that was really unhealthy for them and it was really impacting their health. And it again was staying in that environment due to fear ultimately. And so easy to come up with 1,000,001 reasons not to leave that job that had really good pay, job security, all that stuff. But this person was being pulled. They were being pulled to be somewhere else. Their body was telling them, you need to get out of here. Because don't get me wrong, finances are a real thing in this world that we live in. And you can tell when your body is telling you this is not it. You need to stop doing this. It's time to make a change. And so despite the 1,000,001 reasons to keep doing that same job, despite how scary it was for him to leave, I always flip it around. And isn't it scarier to actually think about staying here, staying in this particular environment, continuing to do these same things and continuing to experience the illness that was coming through his body more and more. And that's the other beautiful thing. When you're in that process of spiritual boot camp and you really lean into faith, you really lean into trusting the universe and all of the help and all of the guidance that it's bringing, you'll realize that there's actually an incredible amount of compassion and love and grace that the universe brings to you. Part of the way that our brains tend to be wired as a default is to look at what's wrong, look at what's missing, look at what's broken. Part of that, honestly, is because it supports survival. Because if there's something we need to address, we become aware of it and we can make sure that we address it so that we can continue living. One of the ways that we've been taught to think within conventional North American society is focusing on scarcity, focusing on what we don't have, focusing on what isn't there. And don't get me wrong, there is a time and a place to focus on pain, for instance, that is calling our attention to it because we need to do something. We need to remedy a wound so that we continue to live, or our hunger is alerting us to the fact that we need to get more nourishment into our system. And so there's a piece of that that's about survival, living with and on the land, for instance. And at the same time, recognition and an acknowledgement of abundance and what is present is critically important. And so when we're going through a process of spiritual boot camp, it can be really easy to focus on all of the things that are going wrong, on why is this happening to me? My life is falling apart. I'm falling apart. What is wrong? And we really can get into a vicious cycle of focusing on what isn't working, what hurts, what we don't like, what we want to end, what we need to get rid of, at the expense of focusing on everything that is there, all of the abundance that is there. This is where you'll hear about the importance of gratitude. Why does gratitude journaling, why does a gratitude practice help us? Helps us because it connects us into abundance. It brings our attention back to what we do have. What is there? What is working? What are the ways the universe is helping us through what we're going through? You know, I remember when I was going through that really intense round of spiritual boot camp about 10 years ago, having that crisis of faith. What good is this way of life if these are the things that are going to happen to me? Is this what my life is going to look like? Questioning, you know, is there a creator or a compassionate universe, or, you know, the universe just seems like a big sometimes. But then I realized over time, it wasn't the universe. It wasn't creator. It wasn't God. A lot of the challenge I was experiencing was human created. It was people created. It was a person making a decision by their own free will to behave in ways that were harmful, destructive. And we see that all around us. Those aren't the actions of a creator. Those aren't the actions of the universe. Those aren't the actions of a God. Those are the actions of humans with free will. And the way that those actions manifest and the outcomes that are a part of them tell us that that is not a good way to live. It brings us back to those messages that come up through our own bodies, that we can choose differently. We can choose love. We can choose community. We can choose connection. And there's always going to be challenges to that, because those destructive and chaotic forces will always come to try to distract us, try to buck us off of that. And our perseverance in that is what grows it. And so when we're going through those times that are really challenging us, really pushing us, it's starting to lean into spirit, lean into the compassion and love of the universe. The times that I've been pushed to the very edge of what I can handle are those times where I've just flat out surrendered and just looked up at the sky. Creator, I need help. I need help. I don't know what to do. I'm lost. In a way that there's this leaning in and this surrender to the universe, this humility, and also just this giving up of that sense of control to say, I need your help. I don't know how to get through this. And that help comes, that support comes when we open ourselves up to it and we lean into it, and it comes in different forms. So starting to recognize it, right? Sometimes it comes in the form of a social media post. All of a sudden there's a reel and it's speaking to exactly what you needed to hear that day. Or you're out somewhere in public and somebody makes a very kind comment that just touches your heart in a particular way, and it answers that prayer. It answers that ask for help. I've had those before where I've said to my friends, like, spirit is speaking through you to me. So thank you for saying that, because I'll hear the message that I was looking for. And so it's really just about becoming open to that. Just like Donna talked about in our last episode, that the medicine is there all along. We are the medicine. The medicine is within. It is all around us. It's there all along. It's just opening ourselves up to receive it and knowing that those challenges are going to come along the way that tell us, well, no, that's not right. You're messing it up. All of these things that are going to try to discourage us. Our job is just to stay the course and keep going forward. The universe often doesn't show us, when you do this thing that's really scary and you take this huge leap of faith, this is what's going to happen. Pot of gold at the end of the rainbow kind of thing. That's very, very rare. And so it often is this leap of faith that's part of this test of facing our fears. The beauty of spiritual boot camp is that as you go through and you come to those crossroads and pass those tests and choose the path of love, of your highest potential, of faith, of surrender, it just grows and grows and grows, the medicine and the beauty in your life, and that's available to you. And it's never over. Life moves in that spiral. So you just get through this really intense part of spiritual boot camp. And maybe you've done some huge healing. You've faced a lot of fears, done a lot of what people call shadow work. You've worked through a bunch of trauma. And then something else is going to come along at some point, and it's going to put you deeper. It's going to test you even more deeply. It's an ongoing process, and it's just a part of what Gary Zukav calls the Earth School. So really leaning into your faith in that process and into what keeps you strong. The other thing I am always talking to people about is what I call spiritual hygiene. And I always say it's just as important as physical hygiene. And that's starting to look at what are the ways that you are protecting, caring for, and cleansing your spirit, your energy. In the first couple episodes of the podcast, I talked about how interconnected and collective we are, how much we pick up that isn't ours from the world around us, from the networks we're involved in. It's an inevitable part of being a human. And we often pick up a lot of stuff that we don't need to pick up, that we can set down, and that when we continue to carry it, it's actually just causing harm. It can even cause sickness. And so when I talk about spiritual hygiene, it's referring to ways of cleansing, letting go, and releasing the stuff that we've picked up that isn't ours to carry. It's about how do we maintain a clear, energetic space? How do we take care of our spirit? How do we create a sacred space in our homes, in our workplaces? How do we practice the spiritual or energetic hygiene of these spaces and places as well as ourselves. And it's also, how do we protect ourselves energetically, spiritually, how to protect our homes energetically and spiritually. And so there's lots of different ways to do this. People have different approaches. On our social media, I have these little reels of different land-based tools, different ways we can give things to the land. So it might be using the stones, asking the stones to help take some of the energies that we've picked up. It might be going to the trees. It might be going to the dirt, going to the water, consciously taking care of that in a shower or in a bath, ceremony, hiking, all these different ways that we can cleanse and clear and take care of ourselves. And then looking at those practices, how do we cleanse our space? How do we take care of our space? Leaning into the ways that you've been taught that you can cleanse and clear a space. And if you don't have specific teachings or medicines, knowing that you can use your own energy and intention. You yourself are spirit, and there is power in that. And you can cleanse and clear space through focused intention just as well. And that comes back to remembering that all of us have the power to heal ourselves, families, our communities. All of us have the power to create sacred space, to care for space, to clear out harmful, destructive energies. We all have those abilities. We just have to put our focus into them, along with a very sincere, genuine intention. That's something that's important to think about, because somebody may be doing a good job of taking care of their own energy, cleansing, setting things down, giving things to the land. But if their home, their workspaces are not cared for in the way that those harmful or destructive or chaotic energies can easily get in and easily affect them, then it's going to disrupt the work that they're doing. So it really has to be our space and the way we move. And then how do we protect ourselves in those spaces that we don't have control over the energies and what's going on? What are the ways that you protect yourself spiritually? How do you look after yourself that way? A really important part of that is actually how we position our bodies, because energy moves in particular directions. And so one of the things is even just being mindful of getting beside some energy that's coming toward us rather than taking it head on. So actually getting beside. This is part of the wisdom of the circle. When we sit together in circle, we do work together in circle, and especially when there's land at the center of that circle where we can directly place whatever it is we're sharing or releasing, then we're not getting it onto each other. We're not taking it in from others in that space. And so we can get beside in any context. Even if I'm sitting at a boardroom table right now, I can just move my body like this and get to the side with whatever's happening. If someone is coming to you and they're venting to you about their day and what they're going through, you can get beside. Whether you're sitting or you're standing, just get beside with your body and help that energy move into the land. That land is going to take that, it's going to help it, transform it, and it's going to feel better for them than if it's going straight into your body. And if you're taking it straight in, it's going to impact you, and you're going to have to do something to take care of yourself. So that's a piece of protection, is even the ways that we move our body. I've also heard lots of people talk about putting up an energetic force field around yourself. And people talk about doing that using different colors of energy and things like that. How do you protect yourself in that way? We don't necessarily want to protect ourselves from loving, life-giving energies. Taking that directly in is medicine for us, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And so as you're going through this process of spiritual boot camp, facing experiences that really challenge you to grow, to heal, to shift, change, to create new pathways, really leaning into what are those tools that are going to help you through that? What's going to help you through those challenges? What's going to help you lean into faith, into surrender, into spirit, into love? What are the tools that are going to help you protect yourself from all of the things that are going to come and try to distract you? I've heard a lot of people talk about Mel Robbins, the let them theory. That's a protection. Let's say you're following something your spirit is pulling you to, and it would be considered an unconventional path, and lots of people are criticizing you, questioning you. Mel Robbins' let them theory would say, let them question you, let them talk about you, let them gossip, and don't let it affect you. That's a spiritual protection, that's spiritual hygiene. So whether you think of it as a tool belt or a medicine bundle, however it is that you think about it, what are those wisdoms that are going to help you move through this difficulty and becoming aware of the power of those moments of choice, taking that step back to ask, am I making this decision out of a place of love, or am I making this out of a place of fear? Am I following where my spirit is pulling me? Or am I making a choice based on what feels easiest or safest, or because it's too scary to do something different? And knowing that the universe isn't going to tell you, hey, if you take this leap of faith, these will be all the rewards, but trusting that there is some purpose to it, trusting you will find out as you go, and really following that inner voice, knowing that spirit is always guiding you for the highest possible good and a manifestation of your gifts and what you will bring to yourself, your families, your communities, the world in this lifetime. The world needs your medicine. Whatever it is you're going through right now, you've got this. Hi. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you on the next full moon.